60%. 6 out of 10 B2B buyers rely on AI in their software evaluation process. Sure, AI helps the sales process. Sales teams are using AI to build more targeted lists, to send more personalized outreach, but what about the buyers? AI has vastly changed how they research and evaluate and buy software. If your GTM motion assumes yesterday's buyers will be the same as today, you're ignoring that buyers are searching faster and deeper without a trace. So how do you redesign your GTM when the rules have totally changed? I'm Benjamin Shapiro, and joining me today is Blue Bowen, the research principal at G2, the world's largest software marketplace where companies build reputation and drive growth. And today, Blue will share how AI is rewriting B2B buyer behavior and what sales leaders must do to adapt. Blue, welcome to the MarTech podcast.
Hey, Ben, thanks so much for having me.
Excited to have you here. So many sales leaders are stuck on legacy go-to-market models when AI has changed the buyer journey. Why are we having a hard time thinking about the new way go-to-market should function?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, people have seen success with the old model and, every day in this world of AI, at the speed of AI, everything's changing so rapidly. So it's really hard to kind of wrap your head around not only what to do, but also how to do it. Especially with the plethora of AI tools out there, it's kind of constantly changing. So I think people are sometimes falling back to that old playbook.
I feel like we're kind of using the Titanic as a metaphor here. We're all sort of in these gigantic boats, mostly sort of the enterprise go-to-market models, where we're trying to steer these large ships, but icebergs are showing up all over the place. Talk to me a little bit about what are the parts of go-to-market that specifically are breaking, what's falling down, and what kind of remains true.
Yeah, I think the number one thing that's breaking is the old adage of kind of predictable revenue. Adding more sales reps equals more meetings, more pipeline, and more revenue. That's not necessarily the case. We're seeing a lot of kind of AI startups with, 10 total employees reaching levels of revenue that we wouldn't think was possible before. So a lot of how we're orchestrating the pipeline development is changing, as well as how we're enabling the sales reps with training, and so on and so forth. So kind of a lot of things are kind of being flipped on its head. But where I'm seeing the most impact and the most utilization of AI in sales right now is more on that pipeline development side of the house.
So you published the report on how AI is reshaping go-to-market and the sales process. Which buyer behaviors matter the most when you're updating your go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, I think the one that's most revealing and that is most transformative is buyers aren't going to your website as much. They're going to LLMs to kind of one shot a solution. What's the best CRM as an example? So that's really having downstream effects on your SEO. There's kind of a shift from SEO, search engine optimization, to AEO, answer engine optimization. So you really have to ensure that you have, user-generated content that can be seen by LLMs, such as G2 reviews, and answer the questions that the buyers are asking. So really trying to be like a trusted and valuable resource when you're kind of creating content, rather than solely optimizing just for SEO and clicks.
Here's a problem that I have with the difference between SEO and GEO. They're both reliant on having wealth of detailed content, right? And people aren't going to Google and clicking on 10 links. They're going to Gemini or, OpenAI, Anthropic, and they're getting one answer. And maybe there's some citations that eventually link them off to a website. So the click volume is down. But if fundamentally we're still reliant on this great body of content, so why does that change anything? It's still about what content you have published, and there's still some sort of a bot that's crawling your content to find it. How is the SEO versus AEO or GEO or whatever we're calling getting into LLMs actually making go-to-market any different?
I think it's changing. There's less visibility. There's less metrics to be able to showcase, yes, this piece of content, this blog did exceptionally well, because they may not click on those citations that you mentioned. They may, have an over reliance and overconfidence on the LLMs to produce the right answer. and they're not going to those links. So you aren't getting necessarily attribution for the great content that you produce and that was well received by the buyer. So I think that's part of the reason why it's kind of changing a lot, is kind of a lack of visibility there. Um, and so that would be kind of one of my things that I would say is how it's changing.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like the problem isn't necessarily that first impression to get people to understand your brand's principles and, sort of extract value and understanding from your content. It's the tack on effects. It's the you didn't land on the website, so I can't follow up with you. So I can't enrich your profile. So I can't extract your email. So I can't send you our newsletter. It's all the sort of supplemental marketing activities, the nurture things that seem like they're struggling, not that top of funnel understanding of who you are. How does this change the go-to-market strategy? Are people leaning more into content? Are they trying to find buyers in different strategies? What's the right process for going and it seems like there's small teams that have mastered this. Who's working and what works?
Yeah, I think it's really about being where your buyers are. So whether that's diversifying where you're producing content, video is kind of rapidly surging as a great piece of content form. Kind of following, traditionally B2B follows B2C, so we're seeing a lot of infusion of video, multimedia content. But also it's almost getting back to the basics a little bit. In the report that I published, we saw that vendor responsiveness and support was the third highest factor influencing a final decision of a software purchase, only behind security and pricing, which, as you can imagine. So it's really, when the buyer finally does get to your site, when you are able to engage with them, it's streamlining that process through the use of AI potentially. And, communicating efficiently and effectively, not having them jump on calls and jump through hoops and loops, just so you can qualify them, perhaps, even just on technographic data. So it's really kind of streamlining that, because buyers prefer, and it shows in all of our research year over year, that they prefer to be contacted later in their journey. That means that they're spending the beginning part of their journey educating themselves, becoming aware of the issues they have, possible solutions to solve that. So when you do finally get a response or a reception or an inbound lead, it's really important to provide an optimal experience for that buyer so they don't go elsewhere to somebody who responded and followed up immediately.
All right. So you mentioned a couple different things there. Obviously, price, security, but then responsiveness is one of the most important factors to buyers. Earlier, you said that we're seeing these upstart companies, small teams that are kind of mastering the new wave of go to market. And so there's a disconnect for me of you've got these large organizations with tons of content and tons of resources. You think with tons of content would mean the LLMs favor them because there's more information about them. Maybe that's not true, but in theory, they've got existing content, so that should help LLMs understand who they are and prioritize their responses. But we're seeing this sort of rebalancing where small teams can have these great go to markets. Is it that somebody sitting there at a small team just waiting for people to like come to their website and quickly responding to them? There's a disconnect. Why are the small teams so effective with limited resources and limited content?
Well, you would think more content equals more visibility is also, the sense of trust and kind of reputation. So it's not necessarily more equals more visibility. So there's some sense there. Also, in terms of, how these AI native companies are growing so rapidly, I think it's allowing buyers or users, similar to like the PLG motions that we saw with Slack to help them grow so quickly, allowing them to experience the product, maybe not focusing on monetization first, but focusing on proving value earlier on. So having a hands-on feel, as well as like incorporating user feedback. I recently read something that like OpenAI, when they were first developing it and now continue to do so, like X or Twitter or whatever it's called today, changes so constantly. They are so in tune with what people are saying, whether it's on Reddit, whether it's on X and Twitter, that they're incorporating that and using that as almost like a feedback loop. So all of that user generated content is being analyzed, listened to, and then kind of acted upon, rather than a quarterly, feedback session or an annual win loss analysis. They're doing it much more live, rather than, the annual plan or the strategic plan.
Yeah, it seems like the product iteration is actually part of the go-to-market, that you're listening to consumers' feedback, you're developing the right solution, and if you're creating something new, in theory, the LLMs could pick that up in real time and then prioritize your responses. It seems like there's a way to sort of tilt the scales as well, right? The buyers are using AI to do their research and understand which vendors they're most likely going to want to have a relationship with. How are the sellers, the opposite side of the spectrum, using AI to enhance what they're doing to maximize the return when somebody actually does engage with them?
Great question. I think right now we're seeing the most common use cases, as I mentioned earlier, all about pipeline development. So whether that's AI SDRs, whether that's account like using tools for account selection, and account prioritization. So understanding when is the right time to reach out to an account. Perhaps they had some signals out there, in the ether, whether that's a funding round, whether that's technographic data being, talked about, whether that's an earnings report, a 10K. So kind of using real time information to prioritize which accounts to reach out to, that may have a higher propensity to buy, maybe showing their willingness that they're in market to buy. So kind of using AI as an assistant to alert you as to when is the best time, rather than saying, I have a book of business of 100 accounts. I have them in a sequence. It's time for me to follow up with them, with kind of generic messaging that, only speaks to your features, not to the prospect's pain points, unique to their business.
It seems like there's a level of sophistication with not just targeting, and we've got the sort of intent signals that everybody's been looking at for years, but there's also this idea of showing value up front, being able to deliver. My friend Jordan Crawford is always on the circuit talking about the permissionless value prop. How are marketers basically showing value up front? Are they able to use AI, be more personalized, but also understand more technical pain points a brand might have?
Yeah, I think it's really tricky. I think one of the ways that we're seeing success of those companies is from the very start, from where they're marketing to when to sign customer up to renewal, one common story. So rather than, marketing, leveraging, or speaking solely to the value of X part of the product or platform, and then perhaps as an underutilized value, or perhaps that's not really aligned with the product roadmap in terms of how they're enhancing the product to be more full spectrum. So we're seeing kind of more synergy across go to market, and that does include product. That's part of my report as well. As products shouldn't be a distant neighbor; they should be really integral in the go to market organization. And then also providing kind of firsthand experiences. Gone are the days of you have to be in 10 meetings to get qualified, to explain your pain points, to go through the sales reps, methodology, not the buyer's methodology, right? Just to be able to get that first demo, be able to see the product, to be able to see the UX, UI. We're shifting that a lot earlier in the process, and enabling buyers to play with the product. Before even jumping on a call, whether that's on a product tour on your website if they get there, whether that's embedded in email campaigns and things of those natures.
My takeaway from what you're saying is there's a couple different shifts that are happening. There's the top of the marketing funnel, which is where most of our traffic was coming from, whether it was inbound or organic. We're seeing a shift away from blue links towards GEO or AEO or whatever we're calling LLM search, which is affecting how we nurture our campaigns, right? We're not getting people to our website, so our retargeting campaigns are effective, right? And so we're shifting our mindset in terms of how we attract buyers, but we're able to be more personalized when we are doing our outreach to try to figure out who's in pain, who's looking for our solutions. And so our push mechanisms are a little bit more targeted and effective. We also have a better job of social listening and understanding. When you think about the conversion rate in the sales process, is there anything that has changed with, okay, I've got a fish on the line. How do I reel it in? Are there any go to market solutions when you have an interested buyers that are helping the B2B buyers actually improve conversion rates?
I think, part of the conversion rate and how that's improving is kind of aim small, miss small. So rather than casting messages to your whole total addressable market, being more pinpointed. So maybe you're not going to try to engage in spam accounts that are showing no interest or no signals. And that kind of helps with conversion rate. So being able to be more deliberate in your outreach, being more tailored to their business problems and how your solutions are going to, solve those is how conversion rates can help increase. So, the more targeted you are, the more honed in on the account you are, the more account research and context you have, and engagement across the buying committee, as it's also not, a one-man shop in terms of who's purchasing the software, can all help kind of trickle down the funnel in terms of close one revenue.
It makes sense that the AI forward companies are more effective as the go to market strategies are moving towards being AI first. For the companies that are making the migration from being, I don't know what to call them, a traditional company as opposed to an AI first company, um, what are the things that you're seeing break first when they try to integrate AI into their go to market and sales process?
The number one challenge that we've seen with companies trying to use AI in sales, it didn't come as a surprise to me, but it was great to see that the data kind of supported it, is data quality and availability. You know, it's a kind of a chain reaction. If you have bad data in your CRM that you're trying to train your AI to learn on, it's going to have a bad output. So really kind of the quality of the data that you have in all of your siloed systems are having a compound effect and kind of undermining the potential that AI has.
It makes sense that garbage in is garbage out, right? And if you're starting to think about how to use AI and your house is a mess, guess what? Your AI strategy is gonna be a mess. Um, in your report, did people talk about any sort of struggle as they're changing their go-to-market? Tell me a little bit about more what was in the report and how marketers and our sales execs can think about making this migration to be sales AI-led first.
Yeah, I think, one of the main things is kind of an over reliance on manual data entry still. In our report, we asked, what are the top use cases for how you use AI? Roughly 40% are using it for sales forecasting, revenue forecasting. But an underwhelming amount, in my opinion, are using it for activity capture or data automation, right? So relying on sales reps to log every activity with accounts, to be able to forecast if this is viable to commit, if it's going to close, etc. So really kind of the basis point is reducing that rep friction in the process and having, systems in place. A lot of these companies are already using systems and tools that have that capability. They're just not using it to its full potential. So really kind of automating the activity capture and the data entry, in order to ensure that there's, better garbage in, as you said.
This might be a dated reference, but I'm going to quote Office Space here. Nobody likes filling out their TPS reports. And I think I'm paraphrasing here, not quoting. But artificial intelligence still hasn't changed the fact that sales reps don't like manual behaviors. And so if you can automate that, you're going to get better quality data with a better output. Blue, I want to move on to our lightning round where I'm going to ask you a couple MarTech and go to market related questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What's the most misleading vanity metric you've seen marketing leaders celebrate?
I would say attribution. There's too many touch points in the buying cycle today, buying journey today. Um, First touch, last touch. It's not insightful enough and not really indicative of the reason why.
So what's the solution? Hey, we're taking credit for this channel and that channel. Attribution is this thing that we've fully mastered. It's all last click. It's all first click. It's MMM. Is there a solution that's actually helping marketers get a better sense of what's actually driving results?
I would say trying to get as much visibility into the entire process as possible. So whether that's using an AEO or GEO tool to identify where you're showing up in LLMs, and also having kind of a new approach, a holistic one to be, it says this is last touch, say this blog is converting exceptionally well. What were the other touch points in that journey? And perhaps that we're seeing that when they have the same three touch points, that's more likely to kind of convert. So
Okay.
rather than identifying one data point, rely on multiple.
I'm going to play on your G2 experience because I assume that you know every bit of data that's on the platform. You mentioned AEO and GEO tools. Who's doing a good job with the monitoring, and what are some of the tools that you or G2 thinks are best in class?
There's a lot of them out there. I don't want to identify all the best ones, but I would say we have a partnership with Profound, which is a leading tool as well. And there's a lot of I think there's over like 60 already, so it's really kind of a blossoming space. Go check out G2's AEO category for a list of all 60 of them. But Profound is one that I've seen and kind of worked with that's kind of um, top of the list right now.
It's a great example of, LLMs and how the go-to-market process is changing, is figuring out which tools you can use to evaluate your go-to-market. You have to search through 60 of them. You're probably just gonna use ChatGPT to figure out which one's the best. You should also make sure you're asking them to, go to G2 and figure out what has the best results as well. Okay, moving on to our next question. What surprised you the most from your AI's impact on sales research?
That the number one use case for AI in sales right now is AI SDRs. I was very surprised by that. I think if you only lived on LinkedIn, you usually don't hear great things about them. But given how important pipeline is and kind of the compounding effect that it has, I think there's a willingness to test those. So the amount of adoption for AI SDRs, I was most surprised by.
Now, when you were going over the research, you saw AI SDRs were the sort of the most adopted AI solution. I think of those as a top of funnel solution. Let's go make sure we're getting enough leads into the pipeline. It, is it SDRs are the most adopted because it's the top of the funnel, and then as we go down, are there tools that you're seeing adopted, and then sort of like sales and contracts? Is it top of the funnel working our way down and that's why SDRs, or is it just this is the tool that everybody decided they wanted to adopt?
I think it's more so the latter. I think pipeline is such a top concern and a continuous challenge for organizations that, the value prop is really promising. It doesn't go to bed. You wake up, you have more meetings and more pipeline. I think people have a inherent willingness to try and take that risk. Something that also surprised me is the underutilization of like sales coaching and sales training tools for AI in terms of like we're seeing a kind of emergence of AI role plays and AI simulation as well as live call coaching to be able to kind of nudge the sales rep in the right direction on the call. So I think that's what we'll see a shift in the coming years in terms of kind of up leveling sales reps. But right now it's I think a lot of kind of easy click wins with AI SDRs.
All right. What's one AI use case you think is totally overhyped right now?
I would say a little bit of the sales forecasting revenue intelligence capabilities. It relies on historical data to predict your next best action. Tells you, if a deal is at risk. Um, I think each deal is so unique and it has its own complexity, especially in enterprise, that it's not a perfect science right now. So I would say that one's a little bit overhyped.
Yeah, it's funny. AI doesn't have the context yet to be able to predict the future. It's still analyzing past behavior and making a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, forecasting, not to say that it's not an art or a science, but it is always some sort of a guess of what is going to happen. So it makes sense that artificial intelligence is struggling to predict the future as well. What's the most underutilized data source on G2?
I would say market intelligence. It's an offering that we have, and it allows you to understand win loss analysis. So in our reviews, we ask reviewers, did you switch from another tool? If so, why? If so, what tool? So you really get access to that competitive environment, understanding why somebody switched to your product. Also, maybe even more importantly, understanding why somebody switched away from your product, as well as you get access to competitor reviews. So really kind of I think in the AI age that we're living in right now, competitive intelligence is paramount and kind of a competitive advantage. And I don't think enough people kind of leverage that data.
Talk to me about the way you can access market intelligence through G2, and I'll give you some context. I was thinking about what are the best ways to understand what are the best tools or the stories that people are interested in for the MarTech podcast. It seems like G2 would be a great source of like, here's the hot tool everybody's talking about. How do you get access to the data, and what's the best way to sort of filter through it?
Yeah. So for market intelligence specifically, that is an offering for our customers in terms of helping them understand the competitive landscape. We also have G2.ai, which is kind of a cool new revolutionary interface in terms of how to find the right products for the right segment, in your industry, as well as momentum reports. So if you're trying to see, what projects are surging in marketing automation, we have specific momentum reports that show not only review growth, and that's why they're kind of gaining a lot of momentum, but also a lot of other factors and external factors to show that momentum.
I'm gonna have to figure out how to tap into all of that through your API and pull it into our research for the MarTech podcast. You'll have to come back and I'll quiz you on what actually has momentum. Moving on to our last question. If you had to bet, what category do you think will have the most unicorns in the next year?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I'm gonna say AI agent builders. Um, we've seen some early success with AI in the customer support, customer service realm. I think we're going to see more and more companies specializing in building AI agents, in not only for specific tasks and verticals, but also as the number of AI agents are growing in adoption. We're going to see a lot of agent to agent communication and tasks. So I think those AI agent builders are going to be really essential in terms of how the agents are collaborating, any security, compliance risks, etc. That's where I put my money on.
It had to be something in artificial
That's a
intelligence.
bit.
My thoughts were AI
Yeah.
orchestration, AI integration, building AI agents makes sense. Are there any other tools that you think or categories that you think are specifically hot right now?
AI orchestration is another hot one. As I mentioned, security concerns are always kind of paramount. So I think we'll see um, a large increase in kind of AI monitoring for security standpoint to make sure that the agents are being compliant. They're saying the right things. They're not giving away any bad information. It feels like every day I read about a new data breach. A lot of times nowadays that's from a human. So interested to see kind of how that uptakes or decreases when we're kind of relying on agents for a lot of that.
Well, there's something to look forward on. AI agents that are doing their own data breaches. Great. Blue, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Before I let you go, you did this report studying the change in go to market and how artificial intelligence is sort of impacting the landscape. Where can people find your report? What else is in it? Just tell us a little bit more about your research.
Yeah, thanks so much. You can find my report on either on my LinkedIn, it's linked, or learn.g2.com. I broke down the report to try to be simple and effective. So it kind of starts with pipeline development, pipeline acceleration, and then talks about the buyer's journey in the second section, then customer retention and expansion, how it's more important than ever. And then finally, how sales leadership and sales management should be kind of evaluating and implementing AI. So kind of climbing the curve from the level of impact in each focus area, and then I have three predictions and prescriptions at the end, talking about everywhere from how to leverage signals, when to use AI SDRs, to how RevOps is really the central nervous system of the go-to-market organization. So feel free to give it a read. I would love any feedback, or kind of would love to kind of talk through what you guys are learning and seeing. And yeah, thanks so much.
Look, G2 is a great resource for the MarTech community. I appreciate you doing the research and coming on and tell us about it. Thanks for being my guest.
Thanks so much, Ben. Much appreciated.
All right, that wraps up this episode of the MarTech podcast. Thanks to Blue Bowen, the research principal at G2, for joining us. If you'd like to contact Blue, you could find a link to his LinkedIn profile in our show notes or on martechpod.com, or you could visit his website, which is g2.com. If you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app or follow us on YouTube, and we'll be back in your feed every week. All right, that's it for today. But until next time, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy.